The late 90s and early 2000s were a rough time for the video game industry. Not necessarily due to the bad sales or a lack of interest in the hobby, but due to the growing amount of concerned parents and politicians worried that video games could entice children to commit crime.
Well, I've said that Grand Theft Auto is the worst assault on children since polio.
For most of us, we can tell the difference between reality and fiction, and we can understand that fear-mongering about video games is ridiculous. I mean, other forms of entertainment such as music or television shows don't create killers, not that the people worried about it care. To give you some examples, video games such as the Doom series, Postal, and Grand Theft Auto were often targets of these video games cause violence debates, and Rockstar, the company behind the Grand Theft Auto series, would only add fuel to the fire with games such as Bully, Max Payne, and Manhunt, the video game that caused a real-life murder. I apologize because some names may be mispronounced. On July 26, 2004, in Leicestershire, England, 17-year-old Warren LeBlanc had met up with his 14-year-old friend Stefan Pekira. Warren would tell Stefan that they were headed to Stokeswood Park to meet up with two girls. It seemed like a pretty good day for Stefan. He didn't have anything to worry about. Why would he? A nice walk with your friend, meeting up with some girls? Seems pretty harmless to me anyway. As for Warren, however, something had been bothering him. You see, Warren was fearing for his life, all due to the fact that he owed £75 to a gang called the Crusaders. This would be the equivalent of about 155 USD today. All that's known about this gang situation is that it was drug-related, and Warren was receiving messages informing him that something very nasty was imminent. And here's where things take a turn for the worst, because after arriving at the park, something would come over Warren. He'd later say he fell into a trance while doing this. Out of nowhere, he began stabbing and brutally beating Stefan with a claw hammer. When Stefan was discovered by police, they found deep cuts to his head and neck. His skull had been fractured in several places, and he had many stab wounds, with the knife having been plunged so deep that it caused serious injuries to his kidney and liver. Overall, Stefan would receive over 50 wounds from the attack, and unfortunately, he would end up passing away as a result of them. As for his attacker, Warren, covered in the boy's blood, would be arrested just a few moments later when he confessed to the murder upon running into two police officers. He would later claim that he only intended on robbing him, and that the reason for Stefan's death was due to Warren believing himself to be in imminent danger of serious bodily harm, as if he wasn't the one with the weapons. Initially, before Warren came out about his gang involvement, people speculated that this murder was caused by the video game Manhunt. For those of you unfamiliar with it, Manhunt is a video game series that sees a player take on the role of a leading man in a snuff film, with each level rewarding the player based on brutality. Aside from the media and activists such as Jack Thompson advocating for the game's ban and a lawsuit against Rockstar Games, Stefan's own parents would come out and pin some of the blame on the game. His father Patrick would refer to it as an instruction manual, and his mother Giselle would be in disbelief at how the murder mirrored events from Manhunt, even though no such scenes exist in the game. She would go on to say that Warren was obsessed with the game, and she too would advocate for its ban, along with other video games like it. It should be noted, although it's possible Warren had played the game at a friend's house, no copy was ever found in his. Instead, it was Stefan who owned it. And it was his parents who would have had to have been the people buying it for him, due to the fact that they wouldn't have been able to sell a video game like this to a child who was only 14 years old. Of course, Rockstar Games was reached out to by many over the case, and they would reject any link between the game and the crime, and would add that the game is clearly classified as 18+ by the British Board of Film Classification. Unfortunately, Stefan's murder would be used and exploited by others in an attempt to push their video games cause violence narrative, and as a result, the game would end up being removed from some store shelves, although it was practically flying off of others due to the media speculation of a potential ban increasing interest in the game. Unsurprisingly, Stefan's mother Giselle would express her disappointment over the increased sales, and advocate Jack Thompson was clearly very happy about this case, since he would remind everyone that it was him who warned Rockstar that this would happen. The Bakira family would go on to hire Thompson to represent them in a £50 million wrongful death suit against both Rockstar Games and Sony of all people, with this money being the equivalent of over 82 million USD today. This case wouldn't go very far, however, because the judge would instantly place sole responsibility on LeBlanc, who had been sentenced to life in prison. Unfortunately, the story can't just end there. I understand why greedy media outlets would want to exploit tragedy, but the family of the victim? For some inexplicable reason, when Manhunt 2 was released in 2007, the Bakira family would continue their video games cause violence campaign, and condemn the game's release. Rockstar's parent company, Take-Two Interactive, would speak out about this, reminding the public that the judge, defense, prosecution, and Leicester police in the case had refuted any connection to the game. And after another failed attempt by Jack Thompson to get a video game banned, the Bakira family would go on to claim that the police had lied about which house the copy of Manhunt was found in. People grieve and cope with things very differently, but I can't understand why the Bakiras placed nearly all of the blame on Rockstar. Warren LeBlanc was the one who chose to get involved with a gang and drug dealers, and it was he who had killed Stefan in this robbery gone horribly, horribly wrong. Though I was unable to find a statement from Giselle, Stefan's father Patrick would give a statement regarding Warren's sentencing, saying, "I don't think any sentence would have been long enough for me." As for the game, Stefan's father seemed to view it differently than his mother did, with Patrick expressing that he believed the game is responsible for inspiring the method of murder. An exact quote reads, "It gave him an idea. It gave him some idea of how to go about what he did." And I'd have to agree with him there. Maybe not about this specific case, because it's possible video games played no role in it. However, in cases where they do, I believe they could act as inspiration, just as some well-known serial killers have acted as inspiration for other murderers. You can get ideas about anything from anywhere, but only a killer is going to get inspiration when it comes to killing. Now, I'd love to end things here on the best ending possible. The mother, at least, clearly moved on, and Stefan's murderer rotting away behind bars. But unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. In early 2020, Stefan's stepsister Jess would say that she felt she let him down, as their attempt at keeping LeBlanc behind bars had failed, and he was unfortunately released from prison. Warren LeBlanc savagely destroyed a young boy with a hammer and a knife, all over 75 pounds, to pay to his violent drug dealers. And a pathetic 16 years later, he's out, living his life. He'd only have been 33, 37 now. Still got a long life ahead of him. A long life which Stefan would never get to experience. All because Warren chose to brutally take it away from him at the very young age of 14. People can change, sure, but in a case like this, how can anyone grant someone like that freedom? Cases like this never make sense, and I hope for their sake, the people responsible for freeing him never meet anyone like him, because clearly they don't understand just how dangerous people like this are. Well everyone, that has been my return to true crime with the sad and unjust case of the Manhunt killing. What a stupid thing to call it. Just as it's pathetic to see that real human beings granted Warren his freedom, it's just as pathetic that people actually use Stefan's murder to push some stupid game narrative. I'm sorry this happened to you, Stefan. And Warren, fingers crossed your luck runs out, because you certainly don't deserve to have the things that Stefan can. Thank you all for watching. And if you enjoyed this, that feels weird to say on a true crime video, I do plan to cover more. But we're not going to be covering the basic, well-known serial killers loved by Hollywood and true crime fans. Enough exploiters have milked those big cases, from streaming services to wannabe podcasters. No, here it's just going to be any story that piques my interest, anything that I find out about that I want to learn more about, and that I may want to share with you guys. And it's certainly not going to be a weekly hour-long series like everyone and their dog has by now. That out of the way, I'll catch you next time. Have a nice day.
Looking for more horror fun?
You're goddamn right.
Then check out the VHS comic book series, a parody of the horror genre that follows the lives of 3 teens as they fight to survive a horror movie, where every day is loaded with blood, boobs, and buds. The first 2 issues can be found in the description below.
I was obsessed with the VHS.